Very good. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to the Board of Education meeting. We just had an open curriculum meeting, which was attended by quite a few people to talk about suicide prevention, drug intervention, some of the trends that we're seeing in our school districts, K to 12. So we're going to now move into the regular Board of Education public session. So that was a quick call to order. If you could just give me a moment to read the notice of adequate notice here, open public statement. In accordance with the requirement of the Open Publics Meeting Act, Chapter 231, PL 1975 announcement, I wish to announce that the New Jersey Public Meeting Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this Act, the school districts of the Chatham's Board of Education has given notice of this meeting to be published by having the time, date, place thereof posted at the Board Administrative Offices, sent to the clerks of the Chatham Borough, the town of Chatham Township, the Library of the Chathams, the Chatham Courier, the Daily Record, the Star Ledger, and TAP, which is an online newspaper. Mr. DeQuilla, would you mind taking attendance?
Sure. Mr. Gilfillan?
Here.
Mr. Arnott?
Here.
Ms. Chambers?
Here.
Ms. Chigarelli?
Here.
Ms. Clark?
Here.
Ms. Kenny?
Here.
Mr. Ryan?
Here.
Mr. Valenti? And Ms. Weber?
Here.
8 present and accounted for.
Thank you. If you're able, could you please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I didn't have too many opening comments because I see there's a number of folks here in the audience. I assume they'll cover it. I just wanted to comment briefly on the recent news article on the lawsuit. The board can't really public too much, as you would imagine. It is an ongoing matter. We're going to let our attorneys handle most of our public commentary, and we will work closely with the administration and our attorneys. We have meetings set up with them to discuss timeline and course of action. But if you do approach, board member in public, just know that, they're not trying to be dismissive or evasive. They just can't comment on an open, active legal matter, and we certainly don't want to have a misstep and possibly cause the district and, quite frankly, taxpayers money unnecessarily because we've said something that we shouldn't have or stepped out of line. So, again, just, certainly make your concerns known, but please don't take offense if we can't engage in an open and active dialogue on a matter that's outstanding. So, thank you for your understanding. Please know that we are going to defend the lawsuit, as our attorney said, vigorously. I would have said it quite differently, but he gets paid to say the big words. So thank you for your patience. Thank you for your support, for those that do, in fact, support the district, and more to follow. And we'll try and keep you as informed as we possibly can. Unfortunately, our hands are a little bit tied from a perspective of being too public with so much information. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. LaSousa for our superintendent's report, if you wouldn't mind, Mike.
Thank you, Ms. Weber. A couple of mundane items for you. First, you have a calendar in front of you that we need to adopt or amend by the end of the meeting, and that is this year's calendar and the insertion of some delayed opening days in order to administer state-mandated testing. We've been doing that for the last several years, ever since Park came online. So you have the 17-18 calendar for amendment, and then to adopt next year's calendar, the 18-19 calendar. As you know, we had 3 different calendars, 3 options circulating. The preference among parents was calendar number 1, with calendar number 2 a second choice, and the difference between those 2 calendars is that calendar number 1 does not have an additional day off around President's Day, and therefore the final day of school is Thursday, June 20th, and calendar 2 has an extra day around President's Day, and therefore the school year would end June 21st, which is a Friday. So it's up to you to choose which one you'd like to make official for next year.
And are these on the agenda? Has anything come down from the Department of Education regarding any type of replacement for Park?
No.
Okay.
It's going to take time for that to happen.
Really?
Because, yes.
Understood. Okay. It's just the tremendous number of days that are taken away from the students for testing.
Mm-hmm.
And to add more is just even more infuriating. So this will come up on the curriculum?
Yes.
Okay. And then just quickly on the second calendars, for 18-19, you pointed out that the only difference is the day around President's Day, I just wanted to point out, I'm never in favor of graduating on a Friday. I'm very cognizant of those that celebrate on Friday night for religious holiday, Shabbats, I believe it's called. So I personally have no preference other than, I personally try to avoid, I'm speaking to the board members, I try to avoid a Friday graduation. I don't know if anybody else had any thoughts on the calendars, 1 versus 2.
I think if the majority of the vote, we have to respect the survey as well.
The teachers primarily prefer calendar 2,
Yes,
but the parents, number 1. And
Yes.
again, the only deciding factor for me is I just don't like to graduate on a Friday. I don't want a family member to ever have to choose between a religious observance and attending their niece's grandchild or son or daughter's graduation.
we have avoided Fridays, but we have had we've tried to
Yeah.
avoid Fridays, but we have had graduation on Friday night.
Right, understood. I know we have, and I felt bad, for the record. So those were my only thoughts. Did anybody else have any comments on 1 or 2? We just have to pick one, and then we'll move it during the curriculum section. So anybody else thoughts on 1 versus 2? Well, if nobody else is saying, then I recommend we
I
go
would
with
stick
1
with 1.
to avoid, to avoid that Friday conflict.
But I also think if the survey support, if we
Yeah.
put it out, we need to acknowledge the
What was
response.
the percentages
It was
again?
this high.
The
38?
38% 1, 28% 2,
Yeah.
34, you just don't want number 3 because they get out too late.
Say again, I'm sorry. Matt.
3 they get out way too late.
3, they get out too late, yeah.
Yeah, three's out.
So is everybody comfortable with calendar 1?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so Peter, if you wouldn't mind, we're going to move that when we get to the curriculum section. Dr. LaSousa, did you have any additional?
Only other minor item I'll just mention is that the forecast for Wednesday doesn't look great right now, and we have used 2 snow days so far. So just to keep it on the radar screen that we haven't needed to abridge the spring break in quite some time, but that's always a possibility if we have a couple more snow days.
It's a certainty if you keep jinxing us
Sorry,
by talking about it.
my bad.
said that we had 2 days off.
Just don't want anyone to be surprised.
We still have 2 left, right?
Yes.
Yes, we're still.
Delayed opening will be fine.
I love a good delayed opening. So with that.
Just do a delayed opening and an early dismissal on the same day, and it'll be fine.
That doesn't count.
All right, well, I know you'll keep a close eye on that because you often send emails like every half hour to me in the middle of the night as you watch the forecast and sit on your conference calls throughout the evening.
Good times.
So let us know how that goes.
And just, and then I'll just, special thanks to Alex and Lisa. It was Alex's birthday tonight, actually, and they really do a lot of important work, and they are not in the front and center most of the time, but they certainly correspond with me an awful lot. They talk to Vin probably on a daily basis, and it's nice to have them here, able to answer questions and give us insight into what they're seeing.
They're seeing very high numbers. 102 high schoolers that have seriously contemplated suicide and 50 middle schoolers is an enormous number of students. So, Dr. LaSousa, as we said, could you work with finance and personnel to see how we can assist them in getting those numbers down and less crisis management and more intervention and getting ahead of that curve?
We're working on it. I'll turn it over to Peter for his
Okay, thank you.
report.
Peter, for the business administrator report.
Sure, just have a quick construction update on the 4 ongoing projects for the CMS STEM edition. The contractor is making steady progress, has started the block work to build the new foundation, which is, again, as I had said before, a little more cumbersome because they have to build a foundation that's approximately 8 to 12 feet high in order to have the floors level, the floor of the new addition to be level with the existing building. At Milton, the contractor is really moving along. The steel is up and they have started the block work on the walls, so they are actually ahead of schedule. So that's a great thing to report. On the auditorium, again, is hate to keep going. The contractor is making steady progress on all the different groundwork for the infrastructure, and so far doing very good work. For the central office addition, unfortunately, the contractor is a little behind schedule. They've started working on the footings and the foundation, and they claim that they will complete the job on schedule. So we will stay on them to maintain their progress, and hopefully the weather cooperates so we don't have any more weather-related delays. But we're on top of them in our bi-weekly construction meetings with all 4 of the projects. Unfortunately, I have to report that the roofing project from the summer is still lingering on. There are still punch list items to be corrected, and we still have a couple of leaks because proper caulking and sealing wasn't done on some of the joints, and we continually remain on top of the roofer and going at it with them and hope to get it all accomplished soon.
I know you withheld some of the funds intentionally. At some point, do you just cut your losses and use those funds to hire a different roofer?
It is. I've been dealing with the board attorney who specializes in the construction. It is a long process of duly noting, hey, we've got this problem, and go at it.
Okay.
Fortunate, as crazy as it sounds, most of the leaks are in the new auditorium, which I don't want to say is a good thing or it's a bad thing to have leaks, but at least we're not destroying anything. You know, for the fact that the contractor has been very good at marking the roof and marking the walls as to where the water's coming in, since obviously it's a work in process, so, none of the finished coats have been applied, so we're not doing any, the water isn't doing any damage now. So
At some point, it's going to impact the timeline, though.
That is, yes, it will, and we've been after him, and weather permitting, he should be able to, I had John Cataldo and I had a meeting with the roofing representative, so weather permitting, the contractor should be able to finish, within a couple of weeks, all depending on the weather. And as soon as we get the March rains, we will know whether or not, or the April showers, we will know whether or not everything is sealed.
Okay, please,
That's all I have.
just keep us posted. And Peter, a big thank you to the maintenance staff down on Milton Avenue. I understand they kind of averted a bit of a blockage during the new construction with ice and...
Yes, they did, and it was actually the custodial staff who came in during the Christmas break and realized that there was a drip in one of the ceilings upstairs, and then went up on the roof, and we had a mini ice rink, because one of the roof drains, when they were building the foundation, got clogged, or they knocked the pipe out and built around it, so the water wasn't flowing out. And the contractor was extremely responsive in getting it all taken care of, and with some minor modifications, extended the pipe directly to the water runoff outside the footings of the new extension, so everything is fantastic and better than it was before the construction started.
Right, that was just a great catch.
Yeah.
We're just very fortunate to have such dedicated custodial and maintenance staff. I can't say enough about that crew. So that was a nice disaster averted because of sharp eyes. Any questions for Peter on the constructions projects? You'll keep us posted on the roof
Will do.
and the delays to the project, particularly the auditorium? Because the middle school auditorium is obviously couldn't start until that one's done.
The high school auditorium is on schedule.
Again. Someone else? Okay, very good. We're going to move on to committee reports. We're going to start off with personnel. Ms. Kenny?
We have not met since our last meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled February 21st at 7:30.
Okay, very good, thank you. Curriculum, Ms. Ciccarelli?
Curriculum, for those of you that weren't here, we had an open curriculum meeting just prior to this meeting, where we had some discussions and talks about student well-being and wellness, and substance abuse and suicide prevention, those kinds of things. Our next meeting is scheduled for March 28th.
March 28th, thank you. Finance and facilities, Mr. Gilfillan?
Yes, we met on January the 17th, just to get it out of the way. We meet on Wednesday of this week. Just the 2 issues that we went through. And both will be agenda items when we go through the regular agenda later. One is just the hiring of a new demographer to help us look at all of our trends and all the issues that we're going to deal with going forward and how that's going to impact us from a facility perspective. You can look at it anywhere from issues in terms of birth rates. We're trying to take that deeper and looking at real estate trends, real estate transfer trends, amount of people coming into this town, the supply that we have on the table in terms of what that could potentially mean to us from a numbers perspective. And then last but not least, as everybody knows, there are 2 potential large-scale construction projects coming, one in the borough, one in the township, two in the township?
Two in the
To the
township.
township, that we believe could have also a potentially large impact on us from a number of students' perspective. So we are going to this new demographer who has come to us with a lot of recommendations across the board as we, again, try to get ahead of the curve in terms of what we're going to see in terms of trends within the population and then how that's going to impact the schools. And the second conversation was around the third or fourth energy savings platform that we have now. Under the district's tutelage, we did hire a group called Synergistic Energy Savings, who comes in and has the opportunity to save dollars for us in terms of developing other savings through the energy consumption, the reduction of energy consumption, and that you will be hiring and we'll be approving that on the regular agenda as well. And once again, we meet Wednesday this week.
And that's going to occur after the executive session? Yes. Okay. For those on finance. Any questions for Matt or Peter on any of the finance or facility items? No? Good. Mr. Chairman? For policy and procedure, or policy and planning?
Joe, real quick.
He asked that the title be carried over on policy.
Mr. Chairman, I like that. If I could make it more regal, I would. Can you look up when our next policy meeting is while I go through this? Or does Peter know? Because I don't know when the next meeting is.
I have no idea.
The
21st, okay.
That's right.
Anyhow, we met January 17th. The superintendent discussed with us some changes being made to account for sick leave and the fact that we do so much more electronically. So a lot of these changes in policy had to do with just updating outdated policies on the books to take into account how we're actually doing and conducting these requests and accounting for them in our modern environment. The other thing we discussed is there was a request from some of the staff to grandfather a $1,000 a year tuition rate for employees that currently have students enrolled. The committee denied the request and stated that any newly enrolled students will pay the $2,000 rate. So we decided that and we denied that request. And then finally, we kind of piggybacked some of what we talked about in finance, which is discussion of the demographer and the scale and the detail of how his demographer report would differ from some of the prior reports that we've used and prior demographers that weren't so successful.
Thanks, Sal. Any questions for Sal on any of the policy and procedure, or policy and planning? Seeing none, I'm going to move on to the liaison reports for Chatham Borough. I don't have anything to report, although I believe the borough will start moving into their budget season sometime in March-ish. Looking at Councilman Weber, I don't see any acknowledgement there. So I don't have anything else from the borough's perspective. Mike, when are we going to start when's our first public finance?
First one is March 6th or 5th, I believe, and then we have our meeting on the 21st. We know that the governor's address and the state aid figures will be delayed by 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to the township, Ms. Clark,
Nothing to report from the township.
booster meeting, Ms. Chaparelli.
The next booster meeting is tomorrow at 7 o'clock if anyone wants to attend. It's at the high school in the media room. And the boosters had their annual booster bash last Saturday. It was quite the fun night. They had about 225 people attend. And they don't have their final numbers yet, but as of today, roughly, they took in about $30,000 in profit. So it was a great night. Chris Tomato's band was played, and Pasquarello Brothers did the food. It was super fun. So they had a great turnout. And for those of you who don't ever regularly attend the booster meetings, the boosters do a ton for our kids. They not only give stipends to a lot of our athletic teams, but they do fund a lot of the assistant coaches as well, and have brought some sports into being school-funded sports after they have been funded by the boosters as well. So their meetings are great and really informative. So generally the first Tuesday of every month at 7 p.m. at the high school. So I welcome you to attend.
Thank you, Ann. Moving on to Chatham Performing Arts boosters, Mr. Arnott.
Thank you, Jill.
First of all, we'd like to congratulate the middle school cast, crew, and staff of Willy Wonka Jr. on a spectacular show. Congratulations especially goes to Director Stiles and Musical Director Ken Bryson. There's a whole bunch of people to thank, but in the interest of time, I'm going to unfortunately leave some of them out. I want to point out that the high school production of Fiddler on the Roof is in rehearsal now, and mark your calendars, March 22nd through the 24th. And that's going to be a fantastic show. I know my daughter's in the pit, but shh, shh, shh. This past Friday night, the Performing Arts Boosters held their annual Broadway Under the Stars Fundraiser. Jill and I were both in attendance. This is such a fantastic fundraiser. The kids come up with their own interpretations of Broadway's numbers that they wish to perform, and they're choosing how to express themselves. There was one, I can't remember her name, but she sang Requiem from Evan Hansen, and I was almost crying in my seat. She was so fantastic. But to each and every single one, they're not only learning how to sing and how to perform and how to act, they're learning how to communicate. They're getting confidence. That's going to help them when they go and work for Goldman Sachs or Google or wherever it is. It's such a critical part of the education process. So I want to make sure we support it. Anyway, that Boosters, the Broadway Under the Stars was very successful. I do not have a take to discuss. Please put on your calendars also our second largest fundraiser in the Performing Arts Boosters, which is Breakfast with the Musicians, is Saturday, March 3rd in the high school cafeteria. And the event will feature District 5th to 8th grade bands, the 7th and 8th grade jazz bands, 7th and 8th grade orchestra, and there'll also be a sneak peek at some of the numbers from Fiddler on the Roof, and you can get those tickets on Community Pass. We'd like to congratulate 8th grade singer Dash Green, who was accepted to the 2018 Junior Region Mixed Chorus over the weekend. And I also want to point out that the Chatham High School Music Department will present a performance of the Mozart Requiem on Wednesday, February 21st at the Chatham United Methodist Church, 7 p.m. It's sponsored through a Chatham Education Foundation grant secured by teachers Ken Bryson and Crystal Grazer, and features a full orchestra and an 85-voice chorus. Finally, the Chatham Performing Arts Boosters also meets this Wednesday night at competing with the, unfortunately, with the Athletic Boosters.
No, we're Tuesday.
You're Tuesday.
We're Tuesday.
Great. Wednesday night, 7 p.m., Lafayette Lounge. Come one, come all.
Excellent. Thank you, Sal. I agree. The Broadway Under the Stars was fantastic. I have the program if anybody wants to see who performed. Elizabeth Stewart was
Yeah,
the young
there we
lady
go.
that performed that piece, but it's one of my favorite performances because the kids get to choose the pieces and they choreograph themselves and they do the arrangements themselves and they practice with an accompanist. Typically, a lot of these kids are involved in the performing arts K to 12 or as early as they can, and they're often told what pieces they're doing. This is the one opportunity where they get to pick their piece and perform it for our pleasure, and it was fantastic. They really all knocked it out of the park. They did a great job. Thank you, Sal. I sat with Beth, who is a singer herself, so it was nice to sit with a professional. So thank you very much. Moving on to Chatham Education Foundation, Ms. Kenny?
Yes, I'd like everyone to save the date for Friday, April 20th, for the Casino Royale that the Chatham Education Foundation is going to be running. It'll be held at Fairmount Country Club. Hopefully everyone has gotten an email about it, but you can also go on to chathameducationfoundation.org and get more details.
Great. That was a ton of fun last year.
One quick point, if I may. There's 4 really support networks to the school district by the parents. There's the PTOs, there's the Chatham Education Foundation, Performing Arts Boosters, and the Athletic Boosters. And it's critical that we support them as parents. We come to the meetings. I'm doing a horrible job filling in for Rich Connors, but if Rich were still here, he would be banging the table saying that you should be donating and volunteering your time, and more importantly, your money. So please, for all those 4 groups, you periodically at these meetings, we sit and we watch the Chatham Education Foundation, the Athletic Boosters come up and present these monster checks. And this happens because of this volunteerism and this parental involvement, which ties in with the wonderful, or not so wonderful, but the curriculum presentation we saw prior. So that type of parental involvement is needed, and we could appreciate this. We appreciate the support.
Excellent, thank you, Sal. Lottery, you good?
I am, yes.
So the casino night, April 20th. If you've ever wanted to learn how to play blackjack or craps in a friendly environment, this is your opportunity. They're very forgiving, the dealers. So I got to pick up the dice like 4 times until I got the roll I wanted. So if you want an easy time to learn how to play craps, this is a perfect opportunity. And it was a ton of fun, and there was a tremendous number of staff there. I was so impressed with the number of teachers and administrators there, so that was awful nice of them to support. As Sal said, if you can't give money, then time, and if not time, then money, so thank you. Moving over to recreation, Mr. Gilfillan.
As you filled in for me last time, was there anything that's actually of importance to the board that?
I'm going to say no,
Okay, nothing.
because Mr. Librero was there, so anything of importance he'll funnel through Dr. LaSousa, and if it needs board action, we'll take action at that time. But Bill was there, so he'll speak for the school district. PTO District Cabinet, Mrs. Ciccarelli.
Dr. LaSousa?
A lot of printing.
I'm trying to think of when we meet.
You haven't met since
This-
our last meeting, correct?
Correct. Yeah, I'm blanking on what the topics of discussion were at our last meeting, because I think that one might have come right after our last board meeting too. But we meet again next week, I think.
Okay, great.
Okay, excellent.
I'll be sure to attend.
Very good. Thank you. So just before our public commentary, real quickly, I just want to make a motion to move the minutes from our last meeting, Board of Ed meeting on January 8th.
I have to abstain.
Second.
Sal seconds. Michelle's going to abstain. Peter's Michelle the only abstention? Okay. Do you mind doing a...
Sure. The meeting minutes from January 8th, 2018. Mr. Gilfillan?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Ms. Chambers?
Yes.
Ms. Ciccarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Abstain.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Minutes passed 701.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you. So we have our first opportunity for public commentary. If you wouldn't mind, but just quickly from a show of hands, how many folks are looking to maybe address at the mic today? And if you change your mind, that's great. I just wanted to get a sense, just from a timing perspective. If you wouldn't mind stepping up to the mic and introducing yourself, Mr. Mays, if you would like to speak out, that would be, we'd like to hear from the student body as well. We have to have the president of the senior class here, which is nice, the gentleman in the suit, as always. So if you wouldn't mind, just step up and just, be cognizant of the time. We're not going to have a timer. I only saw maybe half a dozen folks raise their hands. So if you would just, go ahead, Jane. Don't wait for Gavin. You go ahead. No, go ahead.
He's very chivalrous. He's going to require you to go first.
He's always in a suit.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Weber. So, sitting here listening to a lot of the stuff, and I have to say they hit it spot on. They were great with everything that they said. Mrs. Latterillo, I actually interviewed her today for the Pulse, so it was kind of like deja vu seeing her here. But I've been talking with her over these past 2 years, really, because I found out that last year she wanted to have a lounge put in the school, and I wanted to do that too. That was one of my campaign promises. And we kind of got that this year with one of the health rooms at lunch on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and I believe Fridays. They run a meditation program in there for the students where they can come at lunch, the lights are dim, and they could just relax and eat their lunch there, talk to each other, and socialize. And over the past couple weeks that they've been running it, it's actually grown in size, and a lot of students have been going there to use it, which I feel is a great benefit to the students, especially relieving stress. It is, however, from my personal perspective, a lot more of underclassmen than seniors, whereas the seniors have open campus and they like to go out a lot. And that's a lot of what I've been seeing as a senior myself. A lot of my friends like to leave the school during lunch, even after lab where they only have 30 minutes. And just talking to them about it, they say they do that because school's a mental drain, and they like to leave and go decompress somewhere else, whether it be just driving around for a couple minutes and then come back, or whether they have a 3-hour and they like to leave school, go home, watch shows or do whatever they want, and then come back to school. And it could be a little hard to see how to address that. Obviously, open campus is there as a privilege for seniors, so if they want to do this, they have the opportunity to, and by all means, it is their privilege to do that as granted by the Board of Education on that matter. On another matter, too, with the vaping in the school, Mr. Groh knows that I want to have my bonfire more than anything, and one of them was the problem of vaping in the school, which is still prominent within the building. And I would have to say that the school's been getting a lot of stuff right, but one thing that myself and some other students that I've been talking to would like to see more of is more of outreach and help. A lot of this stuff contains nicotine, same with cigarettes, and it's highly addictive. And students I've talked to actually say, more so in seniors, that if there was help there for them, that they would take it, that they would actually, anonymous classes to help them try to break the addiction because they are addicted, especially so in seniors where next year they're going off to college. So it's going to be more critical that they manage their money better in college because you're on your own there, especially if you're going on the other side of the country from Chatham to college. So to break that addiction before they go to college is imperative, in my own personal opinion, because by doing this, they will not only be, of course, broken from the addiction from this, but also be better suited to try to cope with any other substance that they may encounter in college, as Mrs. Latterulo talked about. And I do think that if it were to just be looked into to see if there was a program that could be had to help aid the students to try to break whatever addiction they may have, whether it be just vapes in general or even other substances as well, in addition to also having these, having the teachers be better aware of things such as how to tell if a student is under the influence of stuff, because I know there are students at the high school who they come to school high every day, and you wouldn't be able to tell unless they told you, just because they use the substances so often. They condition themselves over summer, so when it comes to the school year, they can, before and after school, do these illicit activities and still function properly and in a better means. And I would have to say that some of the students maybe do it because of stress, some of them just for recreational purposes. And this kind of segues me into another topic that I'd like to talk about, which is volunteerism and activities in the high school. Of course, there's a multitude of clubs and things to get involved in within the community that's out there, but they're there for the students to actively go out and join. No students pressured relatively. I was a little bit by my mom for scouting, but since then I kind of took I took the ball and ran, so everything else I kind of went for. But there are students out there who I would have to say their parents don't necessarily push them enough, and it gets to the point where there is a point that I feel parents should be pushing their sons and daughters to get a little volunteerism in there, just so they get a taste of what it's like to see if maybe they want to run with it. Whether they want to volunteer more in a specific area or help them choose a career path. I know there's students at the high school who don't even play sports because they just either never expressed interest or they never had conversations with their parents about their days in the school. I know with my mom, she's been very open with me about her days in the school, how she wasn't really big in sports, but she was a Girl Scout in her day, and I know that impacted me to a minor extent, but still there to have me join scouting and volunteer in that way. So I think if there was more, kind of like, I know in some school districts they have a student representative from the student body go to the Board of Ed, kind of like the student liaison to the Board of Education. I think if our school had something like that, and more positions like that for students to be encouraged or even appointed by someone else, like if the class president was to appoint them, and what the class president should look for is someone who maybe doesn't volunteer as much, but definitely has the motivation and drive and would be a good suit for the position, because maybe they don't realize it yet, but you do as their peer, and even back to the parents. Hopefully the parents recognize that their son or daughter has potential for something and pushes them in the right direction, instead of having kind of a laissez-faire attitude towards what their son or daughter is doing in regards to volunteerism and getting involved in extracurricular activities, sports, and things within the school. So I think along those lines, both the parents and maybe the school could do a little more to try and push those students who aren't doing as much to maybe try to get their feet wet in something, to see that they don't use their spare time to do perhaps poor things, and to better use their time to do better things. And with that, that's it.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mays, I appreciate
course.
it.
Of course.
So, Mr. Mays, are you suggesting we revoke open campus? I'm sure you're... I'm just teasing, and I look forward to your submission of your student liaison that you are going to appoint in the next couple of weeks to the Board of Ed. Dean Ciccarelli would love to volunteer.
Maggie Clark. I could drive in.
And what you meant to say was, I wanted to thank my mother for encouraging me to go into scouting. Thank you, Mr. Mays.
Okay, good evening. My name is Jane Devlin from Chatham Township. I would like to urge the board and the district to adopt all 6 recommendations the counselors posed tonight at the curriculum meeting, especially the one adopting a district-wide mental health, wellness, and suicide program so that the language and curriculum is district-wide and it is the same. I'd also like to point out that MAC, Municipal Alliance Committee, is sponsoring an educational film series, and the first one, called Angst, addresses anxiety, and among the important topics it covers is the differentiation between anxiety, which indeed is on the rise amongst tweens and teens, versus general developmental teen growing pains. Towards that end, I would like to suggest a health class or some forum be devoted to dispelling fake news, if you will, like if you don't take all honors, you won't graduate CHS, or not every teen problem is anxiety. A lot of teens, I'm hearing, can't differentiate between clinical anxiety and just growing pains, and I guess they shouldn't have to at their young age. But I know I'm hearing a lot, like in the community, that the teens themselves are very confused by what they're experiencing. So again, maybe education along those lines would be helpful. And speaking of education, I do think teacher education, along with parent education, is imperative. The counselors also spoke tonight about helping the kids develop self-advocacy skills, giving them the tools. But I've experienced instances where kids have respectfully gone to teachers on a particular matter and the teachers shut them down. So after that, I don't think the students would necessarily feel comfortable going to the principal regarding the issue at hand. So to the counselors' credits, they always seem to be effective intermediaries. But like the counselors did say here tonight, it's the teachers, even more than the counselors themselves, who spend the most time with the students. So I would urge the board to reach the teachers through education and professional development. I'm not at all bragging about myself, but a lot of the kids in the community do know me as Aunt Jane, since I had nieces and nephews go through the school district. I've done a lot of carpooling, a lot of play dates. So sometimes I'm kind of, they're not coming to me directly with issues, and if they were, I would not be saying it publicly tonight, throwing them under the bus at Board of Ed. But I do say I have been privileged to be in a unique opportunity to be a significant other or adult in the children's lives, but not wearing the label as parents. So some of the topics I might hear that comes up, or even in my volunteer capacity through Municipal Alliance and some church work I do, gives me unique opportunity to kind of have my pulse on some of the things the kids might be talking about or feeling, and this is why I often come before the podium to try to be an advocate. So certainly, last, but again, certainly not least, I would like to make a pitch for a break and a respite during the February extended weekend that's coming up by advocating for no homework district-wide as a way of sending the message to the students that it's okay to stop, rest, have a time away from their full-time job, which is school. So again, I would like to urge and advocate and request that. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Devlin.
Hi, Tracy Ness from Chatham Township. I just wanted to take this opportunity at the school board meeting tonight to express my support for the school district, for the teachers, for the administration, for the New Jersey state curriculum that allows our students to have courses such as world culture and learning about world cultures. I know this was way back in the day, but when I was in high school, they actually had a course called Humanities. And in Humanities, we taught, or we learned about all different types of cultures, how those cultures grew. Religion was a component of it. The various religions were a component of it. And I found it fascinating. Being in the bubble that was Moorestown, which was very much like Chatham, I thought it was fascinating to go beyond those walls and learn about those different cultures. And it was a very different time back in that day, because we had to really wait until we got out of college to experience any sort of foreign travel or travel with business or travel through school. But today you can push a button and you can talk to somebody in another continent. You can interact with people. When you're in college, you're interacting with so many different people. In our own town, we're interacting with so many different people. So I applaud every effort that is made to get ourselves out of the bubble and to learn more about the world and how it shapes us. So you have my support, unwavering. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ness. Thank you, Mrs. Ness.
Hi, my name is Nancy Yacker, also from the township. I want to just say two brief things about the presentation that we saw. You know, I've been a high school parent. This is my 8th year as a high school parent, and no repeats.
Nobody was judging.
So I want to just respond to something that they said about, you know, failure being a part of success. And we say those words, and, you know, as a parent, I have certainly talked about that kind of thing. But I haven't experienced that as a parent. I have not experienced that from the schools, I have to say. Possibly in the counseling department, but I think we need to look at that in curricularly or educationally, where failure is looked at as on the road to success, as opposed to, you screwed up, let's move on. And I've seen more of that than I have really teachers reaching out to a student who has messed up. And I think that that's important. A kid will not always advocate for themselves, but I think we need to look at failure. And I also think we need to look when, you know, for example, and I have seen this, when a whole class doesn't do very well, that's, you know, that's a little bit on the teacher. And I don't really, like, my kids certainly have not seen that. And, you know, so I just want to bring that up, that has to be a part of the puzzle of, so that failure isn't quite so daunting to a child. That was one thing. And then I just also want to second the idea of no homework during breaks. I think if a teacher feels that a break is a great time to do work because you have a lot of time, they should have stuff due before the break so that they can grade the stuff during the break. So I this year, for the first time that I remember, we got a notice over the winter holiday break that there would be no homework, and I think that that's really great. And I think it's important for the kids to just be able to break and nothing due the first day or the second or the third day back. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Yacker. Thank you for signing in. Do you want to put the sign-in sheet behind you so that folks can sign in?
First.
That'd be great, thank you. You just put it on the podium.
You
Thank
know
you.
what-
Thanks,
what's
Nancy.
interesting about, in my business, in trading and the stock market, one of the greatest heroes, the greatest hero traders is Jesse Livermore, who's gone bankrupt and failed so many repeated times. So that the notion that we should be teaching children that it's not only okay to fail, but that's where you post-failure, that's when you're going to have your greatest successes, is an excellent one.
Hi, I'm reading a letter tonight.
If you,
Oh, sure, Colleen Trudeau, Chatham Borough. And this is a letter from members of the community. So, Dr. LaSouza and to all the board members. With dismay, we read of the recent lawsuit against the school district of the Chathams. Many of us were present at the Board of Ed meeting last year here in this room when numerous teachers, supervisors, and administrators explained the district's social studies K-12 curriculum in detail, providing grade-level examples. It was clear to anyone who stayed for the full duration of the presentation that the curriculum is sound and solidly based on New Jersey student learning standards. We are writing this letter to express our continued support to you as our superintendent, to our teachers, to our administrators, and to our Board of Education. We also have one request. The actions associated with defending this lawsuit will have clear, tangible costs to the school district of the Chathams, as taxpayer dollars, which would be used to educate children in the district, will instead be used to fight this lawsuit. We respectfully request that the school district and Board of Ed keep detailed line item accounts of every expense associated with this lawsuit, including all legal, administrative, and costs for additional security, and make that information public at each Board of Ed meeting if possible. In this way, Chatham residents can be informed of the costs we are all incurring as the result of the actions of one individual. We thank all of you for your continued persistence, professionalism, and dedication in dealing with these circumstances. We are grateful to all of you for your leadership and for the example you set for our children. And there's over 150 signatures from members of the community. And there's actually some more that I can drop off tomorrow, but some food stuff and stuff. So thank you.
thank you, Mrs. Trudeau. One second, Amy, I'm sorry. Matt, as the chair of finance, could you take that back with Peter to start tracking? I don't know, Mike, if you're going to be able to quantify some of the soft costs, like you spent an entire day or half a day on the phone or answering press, that takes away from the students as well, as if the administration is distracted, if Jill Jaworski is distracted for an entire day dealing with this. So somehow try to quantify some of the soft and costs and the resources.
Even if you could get just hours, just kind of, just for our perspective to see how many hours are being taken away from the scope of the job that you should be, administrators and should be doing typically in the course of a day, or a week, or a month.
Claudia, did you have something?
No.
Oh, very good. Sorry, Amy.
No problem. You ready now?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Amy Coates from Chatham Township. I have a daughter who just recently graduated and another daughter in the high school. And I wanted to thank you for having the open curriculum meeting on mental health and having Mrs. Latarula and Miss Eyre, and to really show my appreciation for you acknowledging how you would like to spend more resources in this area. And Dr. LaSouza, your initiative to really inspire wellness and look into these issues and raise awareness is something that's very near and dear to my heart. My daughter who graduated, one of the things that was presented was that the students are looking more and more to their peers and looking for peer counselors. And so my daughter became a mental health advocate when in middle school peers were reaching out to her, telling her that they were self-harming and that they were suicidal, and she didn't know what to do with that information. So she came to the district, and Ms. Latarula, and for her Girl Scout Gold Award project, she wanted to work on some curriculum initiatives, which she did present to the health teachers with some ideas. So I'm absolutely thrilled to hear that the district is considering an actual set curriculum. But there's, and a couple of things that they said tonight was really interesting to me. But the one thing that I wanted to talk about in particular was in any curriculum, one thing, I don't know how it's discussed or how it's thought about, but the thing that made my daughter really come forward was when she was in 9th grade health, she was shown a video about suicide, and it was made fun of throughout all of the years of high school by the students that saw that because it was so unrelatable. It was like one of those after-school specials, and the acting was so bad. And so I just wanted to raise awareness and raise communication for any video presentations that are part of any curriculum, that there be some vetting or some discussion of the impact of those, because videos are so much different than projects or workshops or speaking, communicating with people. And like, I don't even know if the district is aware, but there are still currently, my other daughter who's still in the district, she was really emotionally stressed out from Rachel's Promise, which was shown in middle school, a video that was the most stressful part of her middle school career. She had nightmares about it, and there was nothing I could do as a parent afterwards, so I just don't know, like, had parents seen it, because I would have never wanted her to see it had I known. And even to this day, the video that she was shown on opioid abuse showed someone dying in a crack house and showed bugs under her skin and things that were just visually so upsetting to her that she didn't know what to do with that information. And so when it's just presented, and then there's, I mean, and then another one in driver's ed this year, they were showing a video that was so upsetting to her, she left the room and a boy in her class actually passed out. So I don't know if you're aware of that. So I really have a lot of concern with the video presentations, and just to make sure that they're not causing more stress and they're opening communication about the problem.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Mrs. Ciccarelli is our chair of curriculum, so she'll take that back and speak with Mrs. Chase and Dr. LaSousse on
Great.
vetting that through.
Okay, thank you.
Ann, you're good?
I'm good.
Hi, I'm Stacy Ewald. I also wanted to thank Lisa Lattarulo and Alex Amer for coming up and speaking. I've had an opportunity over the years, many years now, to work with them through PTO Character Education and through the Municipal Alliance, and they are always thinking about the whole child. They are always very tempered in their approach. This is not the sky is falling. So when they tell you there's a problem, and they're dealing with the kids every day, and they're not just talking about the extreme situations, they're talking about the overall culture. So I appreciate that they spoke. They do a fabulous job. If you have an issue, if you have a question for the parents, don't hesitate to reach out to them. A lot of times parents will say they don't want their kids on the radar for things, but they are so wonderful, and they don't have to tell your kid if you talk to them. They don't have to tell if there's another kid they're dealing with that has a problem. They don't need to tell that family if it's not necessary. So they are wonderful to have a dialogue about what's going on. I definitely encourage parents to reach out, and I thank them. With respect to parent education, through my work on the Municipal Alliance, and Kelly's here also, so hopefully I represent this properly. There's a couple of things. We're starting a documentary series, the Municipal Alliance Committee of the Chathams, and the first one will be on February 27th, and that video, it's less than an hour, and it's called Angst, and we'll bring in therapists to talk with the community after. We're going to have it at Chatham Cinema, and it'll hold about 250 to 300 people, and it's all about anxiety and stress. And just, just so everybody understands, it's not just clinical anxiety, and it's not the healthy stress. There's a whole range in the middle that kids are falling into. So this video does a great job of speaking to kids and to their parents about anxiety and its different forms and stress in its different forms. And the best part is at the end, they give very tangible tips for how kids can address when they're in the grip, how they could address that situation. So I thought that was pretty neat. We had an opportunity to preview that. So that's February 27th in the evening. And then March will be, it's also late March, and that is Screenagers we're going to bring back. There were a lot of parents, I didn't get to see it, but it's all about how our kids, their brain function is affected by their screen time, and from a young age they're being exposed to screens and how that's affecting them. So we want to make parents aware of what the impact of screen time is, and then also to provide them tips. So we're hoping to have counselors on after to speak to parents as well. And we're looking at some other, for the following 2 months, if anybody has any suggestions. We are looking at possibly doing the Mask We Live In, which is the complement to misrepresentation. We are looking at Chasing the Dragon. There is a 15-minute child break that will take place. Let me see if I can pull it up. Nope, it went on screen save. In March, 15-minute child break, another presentation, but that, we'll make sure that gets out, that information gets out. And, I wanted to mention Lisa Lattarulo and Alex Amer and all their great work, but we love, the staff in Chatham, in the school district. The curriculum is always handled in a professional manner. Parents are listened to. We appreciate that. We appreciate the Board of Ed. We appreciate the school district. I just want to offer that if in dealing with this lawsuit, there's a belief that bringing in volunteers will help, in any way to alleviate the cost, to alleviate whether it's extra eyes at the middle school, it's people to help file. I'm willing to donate my time. I'm willing to coordinate other volunteers. So, please keep me in mind if you think that'll help in any way.
Okay,
Thank
thank you,
you.
Stacy. The screenagers, Stacy, I'm sorry, did you say where that was being held or undetermined yet?
That'll be at Robert's, the cinema.
Oh, same place, okay. Chatham Cinema, thank you.
It's March 27th.
March what, I'm sorry?
I think March 27th.
Okay,
It's exact one, okay, that's really good.
great. Thank you. Thanks, Stuart.
Good evening. This is Stuart Carr. I'm from 3 Crestwood Drive in Chatham. I have 4 relatively mundane items relative to what's been going on with all the different topics here. 1, healthcare costs. Number 2, Islam, social studies. Number 3, public question. Number 4, public question. First on the healthcare, Mr. Heap referenced, I think, a couple of weeks ago about, getting a handle on that, what's going on. I didn't really hear anything about specifically what the board has been doing or what kind of groups you have to address that issue and kind of what the time frame is for looking at the next, 12, 18 months, 24 months for the healthcare component of the cost dimension of the salary, wages, benefits. Anything on that at this point in terms of what the board is doing or who you're interacting with about the insurance/healthcare cost?
Want to talk about the,
I mean, this is not something that's new. This is something that's been a
Right.
problem
Understood.
for, I can't tell you, the last 10 years at least, in terms of healthcare costs rising at a much higher percentage rate than what our revenue figure is. So we are constantly looking at this. We are constantly working with our brokers to try to find the cheapest route for us to move forward. We have switched providers 3 times, 4 times in the last number of years, going after lower rates. A lot of these guys are coming in now and they're trying to develop programs that are working more closely with them in terms of the primary care and general care to try to keep their long-term costs down. In all honesty, our biggest issue is we are a 400-person district, and it is very difficult for us to really leverage rates, really leverage what I'm looking for here. We don't get the best rates because of the size of our district. So we are going out and branching out, looking for new ways to try to increase our purchasing power. We're trying to find ways to work with other districts and bringing more districts together under one plan so we can have a higher level of purchasing power. Believe me, this is not something that we don't take lightly, that we're not looking at constantly. It is a very difficult situation for us because from the perspective of our ability to tax for this is we can only, in essence, tax up to what the state increases on an annual basis. Anything above that, we have to find dollars out of our operating budget. So we take money out of our operating budget, that means there's less for other areas for provision for the district, whether that be from a curricular perspective, whether that be from a number of people that we can hire. So we are constantly looking for ways to improve our healthcare profile. It is the biggest problem is it's just not easy in this environment.
In terms of bending the cost curve with HSAs and that type of thing, that's part of the whole discussion.
Anything and
going forward.
everything that we can put on the table has
Terrific.
been discussed, and we just entered into the group down in what do I call Mike? The shift to try to control our costs over a 2-year basis. We've looked at self-insurance. We've looked at everything for us. And in all honesty, the number one thing we have to do is we have to improve our purchasing power. And
You're on the case.
that is the biggest thing that we have to do. Our biggest problem is that we've had outlying numbers over the last number of years versus our peer group. And it's very difficult to go to someone who's got a 7% increase over the last number of years and try to merge them with our 15% tax. I mean, so our increase, and saying, by the way, just look at this thing from a 3 to 5 year perspective on how we can manage our costs and get better visibility and handle on our costs moving forward. So, until everyone's in that perfect storm, it's going to be very difficult for groups to listen in terms of trying to control their costs. Because if anyone's kidding themselves right now if they think that they're in a sweet spot in terms of them controlling their costs on a 3 to 5 year basis. If they're just their day will come. And right now, unfortunately, we're in a period where we have higher healthcare costs than are sustainable. They're not sustainable. It is flat out unsustainable. And to be honest with you, with the perspective of taking dollars from our operating budget, it is something that we have to get a grip on and have to figure out ways to control, because it's going to eat in. Think about it from a very simple perspective. Public school districts right now are the worst business model in the world, right? You have a fixed revenue line and you have a variable cost line, right? And everybody across the state is starting to see that point whereby that cost line is going trajectory through that revenue line. And that revenue line, as far as I can tell, I don't think Governor Murphy's going to change that. I don't think he's going to come in and get rid of the 2% cap. I don't think the world will ever go back, if he gets rid of it, to the world by we can go out and ask for a 5% tax increase. I think the voters will turn that down immediately. It'd be my personal opinion that if we go to and get rid of this 2% tax cap and plus the variables that we can use from a bank perspective, I would be absolutely open to having to go back to the citizen vote. I think that would be a number one thing for me to do, but I don't think that the taxpayers are going to look at and accept 5%, 6%, 7% tax increases if the dollars that we're generating are going into the healthcare costs. I just don't see it. So, still, I know people sit there and they may say, "What are we doing?" There's so much focus and so much priority put on healthcare costs. It's big. Appreciate it, because we understand it.
Just in interest of time, can you move on to Islam?
Yeah, I was waiting
I
for
know,
Dr. Steve.
no,
I appreciate that.
That was our side.
This is more of a Dr. LaSousa question. In the whole Islam issue, a lot of discussion, a lot of emotion, et cetera, et cetera. One thing I haven't seen, and maybe it's in the curriculum, again, I wade into curriculum very infrequently, it seems to me this is a great learning moment from a constitutional law / First Amendment / Establishment Clause, et cetera, perspective. And the question is there anything in the high school or even the middle school curriculum where anybody's going after that? Because again, there's enough public information out there, so it's not like we have proprietary or secret types of positions we have to deal with. Just looking at the First Amendment considerations, looking at the Establishment Clause considerations, all these types of things relative to the lawsuit. It would seem to me that's a heck of a case study for kids to be looking at real time to say, okay, forgetting the emotion, what's the constitutional law component of this? Is that relevant? Is that too specialized, et cetera? Whether it's government, whether it's con law, whether it's AP, history. Is there any thought to that, or have you been doing that in the class? Because it seems to me, with all the costs and all that, that would be like one, positive that could come out of this thing. Any sense?
It has high relevance. I don't think our teachers are eager to land themselves on national news broadcasts at the current time.
Was a constitutional law question, though, in terms of...
I understand, but if you're talking
actual
about the specifics of the case law and the board, or the case study, and the Board of Education and people like me are refraining from commenting upon the advice of our counsel, our teachers are not going to want to launch into units of study revolving around this particular case study.
That'd be, like I said,
Yeah.
from a case study
In 15
perspective,
years
it seemed
from
like
now,
a heck of a
it
nice...
might be something
Maybe that's
different.
the answer. Okay, so much for that. All right, number 3 issue. I sent a memo to Ms. Weber a couple months ago about a non-binding public question concerning the capital reserve account. And I was curious whether there's been any thought on that. The basic argument that I made was we have certain expenditures for capital projects, in this case, for example, the central office buildings, et cetera. The question is whether we should have a non-binding public question when we decide to but decide to spend more than a certain amount of money, say $1.5 million or $2 million on a particular capital project. For example, if we had to borrow the money, we'd have to go to the public to get okay through a referendum. If we salt away the money in the capital reserve account and then use that for example, a capital project as opposed to boilers, as opposed to windows, as opposed to roofs, we essentially can get around that process. And I think that, arguably perhaps happened with the central office building. So the question is, could there be a best practice adopted to say, if we're going to go north of a certain figure that is in a CapEx new expenditure scenario as opposed to a deferred maintenance or whatever else, that we would, again, afford the public a non-binding question? Any thought on that?
No additional thought other than to give you the same answer I give you all the time, in that, the Finance Committee looks at the best ways to pay for different items, whether it's taking it out of our capital reserve or putting a second question on. So a lot has to do with state funding, what funding is available, where's the cheapest money to be had. And just, you and I go back and forth sometimes in email, and I know you have a healthy exchange with Dr. LaSousa and Peter. But just as a general comment, as a school board, because I know you also have a comment, your fourth question is going to be about putting the vote back to April,
I'll get to that.
right? I thought I would just jump ahead.
Good. We'll get to that
So
in a
just
moment.
in this particular governing body, we're a school board. So our role is to ensure that the school has the proper resources that it requires to not just run at bare minimum, but to run at the proficiency and the excellence that the citizens have come to expect and deserve and quite frankly demand. So as a school board, the 2% cap that we're currently guided by, as Matt mentioned, that doesn't even cover our variable expenses. So last year's budget, for example, the 2% didn't cover our salary increases or our health insurance. We then had to pull from our operating budget. So the 2% does not even keep the lights on. And I've heard some people glibly say, well, then turn some lights off. Well, that's not really what the residents have come to expect. They don't buy a $2 million house or a $1 million house on Talmadge with 3 bedrooms and 1 bath because they want us to start turning lights off. The goal is to enhance our education, not diminish it. So, Mr. Carr, go back and say anything over the 2% has to be approved by the public. The public then voted for these 9 individuals to sit here and make the best possible decisions for the district, and that's to ensure that they have the resources, particularly staffing. Just to take it one step further, if we had to, let's, for example, we voted in April, and we asked for 2%, and it was turned down. Then the question goes to the township committee and the borough council, and then they have to vote on whether that budget should be upheld or rejected. They can summarily say, cut $1 million out right off the top. And I would think that as elected officials and very political bodies, they would say, well, our constituents said we need to cut, so we're going to cut. Well, the only place to come up with that kind of funding is headcount. We would have to lay off between 15 and 20 teachers to come up with that kind of numbers. So if that's what the residents want, we're okay with that. I mean, we'll do what you want, but I don't think that the residents want us to lay off 15 to 20 students. And I'm one of those empty nesters shortly. My youngest had a class of 11 kids in his kindergarten class. I think the rest of his classes were 18 to 20. I would not be comfortable voting to say, you know what, it's okay to have 35, 40 kids in a class. It will degrade the education. So I think you're asking me personally, because you seem to like to ask me personally this question. I'm still not in favor of moving the vote back to April because I believe it would have a diminishing effect on the education that we're able to offer to our students. Does that answer your question?
No, that's my fourth question.
I jumped to the fourth one. Remember I said I'm going to jump ahead to the fourth question?
Let's get back to the third question, and we'll get to the fourth question. On the third question, there's a source of funds and a use of funds. If we have a use of funds of $1.5 million or $2 million, if we have to get the source of funds with other people's money, the public has to approve that. Coincidentally, if we bury the money in the balance sheet, the public does not have to approve that. I'm simply saying take the source of funds out of it and just say, if we're going to use the funds for a particular purpose, get the pulse of the public. That's simple. It's clear in a referendum scenario, you have to get the pulse of the public because we need to borrow the money. You salt away the money on the balance sheet, you don't need to get permission. It's
Okay,
pretty
thank you.
simple. And that's where we need to be able to do that. So the question is, can we adopt a best practice to have a non-binding question when we have a CapEx north of $1.5 million for a new project, such as a central office building, as opposed to deferred maintenance, boilers, and that type of thing?
Okay, thank you. We'll take that under advisement.
Very good. Can you take it as an agenda item or just under advisement?
Under advisement at this time.
Okay, but at some point you could put it on the agenda, perhaps.
I'm going to punt it to the
Advice.
facilities committee and they'll discuss it and...
Terrific. Okay. And then to item number 4, again, in the, I think it was October 30th, whenever it was, the candidates forum, again, I was glad to hear your 180-degree turn, Ms. Weber, about the...
No. Did you just hear my last comment? I am still not in favor of moving it to April. I want to be very clear, and that's what I wrote back to you.
That's fine.
I am not in favor because I think it will degrade the students' education.
And that's terrific. I appreciate that, and I hear that. What you did say you're in favor of is having a public question as to whether the public agrees with that premise. That's what you agreed to, and that's what's very nice. And that was 100%, 180-degree change.
Then I am publicly stating again, I'm not in favor of that.
So when you said non-binding question, sure, you meant just kidding, or what did
Yeah,
that mean?
sure, just kidding, yep.
That's what it means. Okay, so you said there was a very specific question raised by the League of Women Voters.
Yeah,
that
no, I
said-
understand, I was there, but
And-
you and I have had this conversation at least a dozen times. I don't know how I can be any clearer. This is my personal opinion, it's a body of 9. I've never been in favor, because I'm not going to glibly sit here and say my kids had a phenomenal education, and you know what? Your kids are going to have to deal with a classroom of 35 and 40 kids in a class. I'm not going to do it, and that's what I believe the result would be.
Again, you indicated that you would now approve a public question on the item. So if the
Stuart,
public
I've changed
decides-
my mind. I
you
am in
changed
no
your
way
mind.
in favor of having the vote move back to April. I've never stated that I've ever been in favor of it. I was a proponent
Agreed.
of moving it to November.
Agreed. But you said you were in favor of having a
Stuart.
non-binding public question on that
Thank you.
item. Is that correct? That's what you said. So you said, just kidding, you're not going to...
No, I'm not kidding. I'm just,
Can I
I
interrupt
can't,
for a quick
I
second?
cannot be any clearer on this point.
This is beating a dead horse.
Right.
Which I don't appreciate, because we have other
Sure.
things to
Well,
go into.
We're only a year and a half away. Again, we have a public question, so the public, I think, would appreciate
And
having
number
that courtesy.
two, I would remind you to look at the performance of the people that are working in this district.
Superb, no
From
issue.
Mr. Tequila to Dr. L'Souza to the teachers. When you show that we have an underperforming district that's not spending the least tax dollars and getting the results per
All
student.
acknowledged.
And with a board so dedicated as that, when you show us that there is a lapse of responsibility and oversight, then I think we can take these issues a little bit more seriously. But when everything is running like a Ferrari, and I'm sorry, I don't like to use analogies, but I don't appreciate beating a dead horse. It's a waste of my time, and I don't appreciate it.
Okay, well, anyway, we had a public comment, and we'll come back on that. Thanks very much.
I guess I'm last.
Talk
Hi.
back.
I let you go in front of me. You didn't tell me how long you were going to be. My name is Jennifer McNally. I live at 19 Ferndale in the township, and I just had a quick question tonight. Something had come up with the possibility of a discussion tonight at the meeting. But first of all, I say thank you all for the hard work you do. There's an acknowledgement in that letter earlier from the community, and I thank you again for everything that you do. It's a lot of work and responsibility to take on. My question, though, for tonight is about the redistricting. And it's been a topic, perhaps the elephant in the room tonight in some of the rows back here, to talk about. And would the redistricting be something that would be on the calendar for the school year for 2018 into 2019, or 2019 into 2020?
1920 with Dr. D'Souza.
1920 would be the soonest,
Okay.
and 2021 would be the backup.
Okay. So in looking forward in that way, my kids go to Southern Boulevard, and we'll be at Southern Boulevard, another one next year. What are we doing to sort of work with the schools right now? There's sort of an imbalance, right, of the schools. We have a huge number here of kids at Southern Boulevard and the diminishing sort of populations of the other schools. What are we doing to move forward in the interim, where we're getting a demographer and doing all these studies? What are we doing to sort of lessen the burden of the population increase at one place for right now? Like, how are we working within the system?
Sure. So short of a redistricting, the only way to deal with that is really to move programs around. So 5 or so years ago, when Washington was the most crowded school, we moved programs from Washington to Southern. And in the last few years, we've been moving programs out of Southern and into other buildings. So we moved 2 classrooms, I believe it was, out of Southern last year into Washington. We moved Washington's 2 preschool classes to Milton. So Milton is the only place now in the district with the typical pre-K that we have. All of those programs are standalone. They're for special education learners. So that's really our only mechanism right now without being more disruptive to the rest of the school population.
Okay, so would you be looking to move those classes, say, going in the fall, back around to the other schools, more of those classes?
We are having those discussions now about how to most efficiently use all 3 K-3 buildings in the fall.
Okay, but nothing's set yet.
Nothing is set yet, in part because Milton Avenue School's under construction. We are doing our first grade registration this week. We've completed our kindergarten initially, but those kids keep trickling in,
I should
for
probably
the next
register
bunch
my
of months.
first grader soon, huh?
Yes, that's a reminder. So we don't have all of the, the numbers right at hand yet to be able to make firm decisions.
Okay. And my sort of leads to my second question is that I know from what we referenced before that there are some large construction projects coming down the wire that the township, I think more the township has agreed upon versus in the borough. What do you work with? Say this project is here, the planning board, they voted to rezone, right, to change the zoning, that sort of thing. Is there any sort of like, I don't, sort of working together before this sort of zoning change comes down, right, for 54 luxury condos that are 4 bedrooms? Do they ever come and talk to you guys and say, we know the schools are here, how does this affect the school? Is there any sort of communication between the two at all or not? Should there be communication between the two?
Yes, there should.
There's been some communication between the two. Ms. Weber and I met with a township committee person about a year ago or so.
Right, they try to inform us as best they can, but we really don't get to weigh in on their decisions. And to their in their defense, they can only make a comment on the plan that's in front of them. So the plan that was in front of them at the time were the 54 luxury condos. So that's not to say a better plan or a worse plan could come, but the township committee can only comment and make a recommendation based on what's in front of them.
Right, so I think moving forward, like say we get this demographer in and they work at the numbers and things like that, because I think the numbers have really changed where the birth rate may be contracting across the country. It's up here in Chatham, obviously. So would we ever say, here's our demographer's findings before you go ahead with your next project that you rezone? Would we make that information available to them? Okay, is there a way that is there ever a joint meeting or something like that people come together? I guess there's a liaison to the township, that sort of thing? Is that what I saw in the agenda?
We do have a liaison to the township, and Dr. D'Souza works, closely with the administration here because they sit down the hall. But the two entities don't necessarily align all the time.
Right.
They have to satisfy their affordable housing obligation, and that's not a light task. It's a very complex task, and I certainly don't know all the bells and whistles, but I know it's a heavy lift.
It's been ongoing for a very long time.
It's been ongoing, and it's very complicated, and the township is doing the very best that they can. But again, they can only weigh in on the plans that are in front of them. Currently, it was 54. It could have been 554, but that's not the plan that was put in front of them. So, they are also elected officials, and they are doing the best that they possibly can. Dr. D'Souza, did you want to add to that regarding a working relationship?
No, only that this all kind of points to why we are hiring a demographer. And he spoke with us about things like yield, the type of housing and how much student yield you can expect from it, the kind of community that this is. Points that we didn't know about, like typically the shorter the duration people stay in their homes, the higher the student yield because people come in for the schools and then they leave, which is something we've seen. He is going to look at the disruption factor, as he called it, which is if you do redistrict and you've got a second grader at Southern Boulevard, what happens to that student? And, all of those kinds of factors. So that's why we're going to move forward with a more comprehensive study than we've had done in the past.
I think there's a lot of anecdotal evidence. I know at the township meeting about how, this is sort of projected to be X number of people not had kids and that thing. So I think a demographer who has experience in seeing the sort of real life scenarios will be very helpful.
If you look at it from a very simple perspective, the demographer reports in my 10 years on this board were very focused on births, right? And but what it doesn't do, it doesn't let us understand what our community is. So we have a community that has 60% of the homes don't contribute children to the school system. And we don't understand what the age brackets are of that 60%. How many of them are ready to move down to Florida for retirement? How many of them are 25-year owners, and we should expect them to look to move? Well, all different things and variables that we've never looked at in the past, and trying to get a better understanding of what our constituents look like, and then trying to figure out what that means to the school system. Because if you look at it from perspective of births, we have averaged 185 births in Chatham over the last 4 or 5 years, and yet we have first grade classes of 330. So that indicates that it's people moving in to the towns, and so us understanding what our real estate portfolio looks like and how that's going to impact how people can afford homes in Chatham, and what that means from people moving in, the supply of homes that are going to be available over the next 5 years. So we are looking at it in a much more diverse way in terms of trying to get a better grip on what our actual trends are going to be. over the next 5 to 10 years.
That's great. I think it's helpful, because I know my son's born in 2009. Across the country, it's a contraction birth rates, but you come here, and you guys had to add 2 extra classrooms last year at Southern Boulevard for second grade, I think, or for first grade, 2 years ago.
We're a
So-
victim of our own success.
Right, it's too good. Well, I think a lot of people moving here who I've met, we had 70 new families at Southern Boulevard last year, and the number one thing, how'd you find Chatham? They Googled best schools in New Jersey.
Yes.
Google search from Sweden to like Japan came up with, Chatham schools, so that's how a lot of people end up here. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time and consideration and
Mr.
answers.
Nally.
Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Heat.
Who's the last one?
Good evening to everyone. Bill Heap from Chatham Borough.
Bill, just a quick comment. We're going to close the first section of public commentary after Mr. Heap. There'll be another opportunity right after right after we get through the agenda. Sorry, Mr. Heap.
I have 3 completely unrelated comments. The first is credit where credit is due. I was at the Broadway review on Friday night, and I thought it was spectacular. It is the best live entertainment in town at an even better price. The kids were terrific. Second comment, is there any way to give me an idea of, in a year, the typical number of lawsuits that the district faces and what kind of money we're talking about with regard to those lawsuits? Is that something you can give me off the top of your head or an estimate on? Or do I need to get back to you on that?
I couldn't give that to you off the top of my head. I'd be happy to talk with you tomorrow or the next day.
Okay, but there are multiple lawsuits ongoing at any one time, I would guess, or no?
We have a law firm on retainer for a reason, because we need advice and counsel from them, and sometimes we have some type of litigation that we're dealing with.
Okay. The last comment is during the presentation, the curriculum presentation, one of the big things was, of course, one of my pet peeves, kids and their cell phones, their electronic devices. And from my perch in the back row, I was able to see lots of parents who couldn't put down their cell phones. I think it's time for parents to take a good, long, hard look in the mirror. If you can't put your cell phone down, how do you expect your children to? The apple doesn't fall very far from the tree. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Heap. Thank you. We're just going to... what do you want to cover that? Board business, okay. All right. Yeah, but he's going to leave that. Mine too. We're just going to quickly move through the regular agenda, but we will have an opportunity for another public commentary. And we'll also bring up additional topics in board business. So just very quickly, if we could move on to the regular agenda, starting with personnel, Ms. Kenny.
Yes, I'd like to move action items A1 to A22, A1 to A21 in the main menu, and then A21 and 22 in the addendum.
Second.
Second.
Thank you, Ann.
Just like to mention, Sal gave a lengthy summary of the various ongoings in the Performing Arts Department, and on the addendum is the retirement of Dr. Barbara Klemp, who has been with the district for 30 years, and she served in a variety of roles, from music teacher to director of musicals to obviously the supervisor of all of our arts programs the last number of years. So she's been a great contributor to the school district, and I just want to wish her well in her retirement.
Yeah,
Hear,
Here. She has done a great job. She graduated from Southern Boulevard, didn't she?
She went through the Chatham Township schools.
Kramer was her art teacher.
Mrs. Kramer was her art teacher.
I think that was
Well, good luck to her, and we're going to have to thank her for all her hard work over the years. Does anybody else have any questions or comments about the personnel items,
Before
including...
you proceed, since Ms. Grant is trying to be incognito and wish over to the audience and not at the table, on A6, the correct employee number is 324, and on A8, the leave replacement teacher moves to a column and step of B2, and the prorated salary is $30,414.96.
Can you amend that? Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, the employee number on A6 is 442 instead of 1324.
Way to punt that one to Peter, Beth.
Nice punt.
Does anybody else have any additional questions? Again, just for the audience, these are posted Friday afternoon, so we have a chance, everybody has a chance, including the public, to read these over the weekend. No additional comments or questions? Peter, would you mind?
Sure, agenda items A1 through A22, including the addendum and the 2 corrections on A6 and A8. Mr. Gilfield?
Yes.
Mr. Arnott?
Yes.
Ms. Chambers?
Yes.
Ms. Chicarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Agenda items passed 8-0.
Excellent. Moving over to finance and facilities.
Yes, I'd like to move action items B1 through 16 on your regular agenda.
Second.
As you saw, a large donation to give a round of applause to the Chatham Middle School PTO. Donation amount of $24,970 from the PTO to be used for the renovation of the school's interior courtyard into a reading garden for the use by the middle school students and the staff. It's an unbelievable donation.
Wow. That is great. Any additional questions on the finance or facilities items? All good. Peter, do you mind?
Sure, agenda items B1 through B16. Mr. Gilfield?
Yes.
Ms. Arnott?
Yes.
Ms. Chambers?
Yes.
Ms. Chicarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Agenda items passed 8-0.
Great, thank you. Moving over to curriculum. Ms. Ciccarelli?
I'd like to move action items C1 through C4, or agenda items C1 through C4 on your regular agenda.
And C4, just to recap, we're going with calendar number 1,
Correct.
which has us graduating on the Thursday, and one less day at President's Week.
Yep.
We're all in agreement on that, calendar 1?
Second.
Correct.
Okay, great. Any additional questions? Sorry.
I second.
Michelle second. Oh, very good. Go ahead. Go ahead, Peter.
Agenda items C1 to C4, C4 being calendar option 1 for 2018-19. Mr. Gilfield?
Yes.
Mr. Arnott?
Yes.
Ms. Chambers?
Yes.
Ms. Chicarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Agenda items passed 8-0.
Mike, when will this calendar be available on the website and to parents? Tomorrow. Okay.
And then moving on to policy, Chairman Arnott.
I want to move back to Mr. Arnott, if you don't mind.
Wow.
I
That was it?
The power.
Too much.
Didn't last very long.
That didn't last long at all.
Call me Comrade. I'd like to move D1 regarding Regulation 3432 on sick leave.
I'll second the.
Any questions on that item? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Agenda item passes 8-0.
Thank you, sir. We're now moving into board business. Any new business or comments from any of the board members? Ms. Clark has something?
Yeah, I'm just going to echo something that Jill said. I wasn't at the last meeting. I watched the meeting, and one of the public comments had to do with moving the vote. I oppose moving the vote back to November. I had sat in many, many board meetings on the other side prior to becoming a board member. This is not something that came at, overnight. It was years in discussion. Chatham was an outlier for a long time. When many districts chose to move the vote, Chatham was one of the only districts, that didn't. And when the time came to do it, it was discussed heavily at a board level. I was on the board when it was voted. I stand behind the vote I did at that time. We are elected officials. There's no one on this board at this point that was appointed. We've all been elected by either the township or the borough to represent you. We do our job. We do the best we can. And, there's no other budget that you vote on. I vote for my officials who make decisions on my behalf in the township, my state officials, and my national officials. So I oppose moving the vote back to November. That is my stance.
And just a note, we are ineligible in any event until 2020 is the year, correct? 2020 is the first year we'd be eligible if the state even allows it. Currently is a moratorium. The state doesn't allow districts who are even eligible to move back at this time, but we watch it closely, but I believe there's about 10 or 12 districts that still vote in April and 560 some odd that vote in November. Okay, thereabouts. The numbers are
I think there's 14.
14?
April votes.
Okay. So it's not like we're outliers on this particular item. I mean, we did wait several years. Any additional board comments on either anything that we talked about? I just want to thank Kelly Lufborough for bringing a presentation to the middle school. A parent had come by. You had arranged for a parent from, I believe, Vermont. He talked about suicide. He lost his son. Cyberbullying and the anxiety, and it was interesting. He shared with the parents in the group, and I think there was 100 or so parents in the audience, maybe 200. Maybe Kelly has a different take on it. But he had shared lessons learned, and it was really, I took a lot away. He was saying that had he known these things ahead of time, he wouldn't be on stage talking to us about having lost his 8th grader, so early. Had he paid attention to some of the signs and the warning signs, he missed them, and he was able to share those with us, and we were certainly we will benefit from that greatly. And I'm sorry that his loss, he's now sharing, and it will be our gain. And hopefully, I don't know, Kelly, is that posted that folks can see that?
That's a good question. We'll be
Okay. Or if you have an opportunity to bring it back.
But we'll certainly make sure to link to his website, which has really tangible feedback for parents.
Okay. So what Kelly's saying is, if you can't hear because the mic is not on her, on the Municipal Alliance website, they'll put a link out to his website with resources and some video clips. But it was really impactful, some of the lessons learned, some of the signs that he wished he had seen, or he wished somebody had stood on stage and told him those things because he would still have his son with him today. So I just want to thank the Municipal Alliance for bringing that program to our students, and then as well to the parents in the evening. And I know there are 2 different programs. He did not speak as frankly to the students as he did to the parents. So Mrs. Coates, to your point, it was tailored to the students. So that was my only additional comment. Thank you to the Municipal Alliance for bringing that program. Any additional comments? I know Mr. Ryan was also in attendance at the suicide.
Yeah, I would just make one comment. I wish that we can do that a little bit more often, and I wish there were more people there.
Yeah, that's always the case. We always wish there's more people, but...
But I will say my son's in 8th grade, and he really doesn't have a lot to say about pretty much anything. He came home and could not stop talking about it, and he was not talking about it in a scared way. He was really talking about it in an honest way, and I think the way that I had seen him speak when he was here last in Chatham, the father, he really reached the kids, and he reached my son, and what to look for, and how to approach situations as an upstander or bystander, or if you're in it yourself. So I think he really hit on all angles. So.
It was a great program. Thank you, Kelly. Any additional board business? I didn't mean to end on a sour note. I just had to comment since we were talking about wellness and suicide prevention, and we just need to make sure we stay in front of it, and by talking about it. I know Councilman Resto and Mayor Ritter are pushing it in the township and the borough, and we just have to keep talking about it and remove the stigma and keep it on the forefront. So thank you again, Kelly. Any additional items for board business? Seeing none, we have our second opportunity for public commentary. If you wouldn't mind coming up to the mic, introducing yourself. I know it was a tough topic to end on. I apologize.
Mr. Mays is still here.
Just a quick follow-up, too, because I have a 7th grade daughter, and she sat down, I'm sorry, Lisa Carey, Lake Road in Chatham Township. But my 7th grade daughter, she came home and talked with us after dinner when the younger ones went up, and she was so touched by it. She couldn't believe her friends had tears, but in a good way, she just took away from that talk that, and I think it's following up on the Chatham High School president who was here. It's getting to the students before it's a problem. And her takeaway on it was that even if you don't feel loved, that your parents each love you. So even if you feel that no one loves you. So that, as a parent, I said, what a great message to take away and to come home and talk about it. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Kelly Loofborough in Chatham Borough, and in all fairness, I have to say the middle school and middle school PTO also get most of the credit for bringing Ryan's story, so just to make sure that's really clear, that
Thank
they
you,
really
Kelly.
were instrumental in doing most of the work. We just helped write a check.
Help arrange it, thank you.
But I also wanted to say, as you're continuing to look at health curriculum, both the borough and the township now are designated stigma-free communities, and I think that would be a really important piece, and a piece that gives a lot of information about language to use, and some good additions to the curriculum could be subsidized with the Stigma-Free Communities program, and information that comes from, I think Morris County has a good stigma-free program, and then it's a
Okay, excellent.
pervasive statewide program in New Jersey.
Very good, thank you, Kelly. I make a motion to close the public session.
We're moving to executive.
Moving to executive.
You going in the back, Pete?
Yeah, no,
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Please drive safely.
I'll pick them up.